and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by Projections, North America's leading provider of employee communication resources, including video, websites, e-learning, social media, and virtual events to help you connect with your team. For more information, you can visit us online at projectionsinc.com. I am Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and your host for today's episode of Project HR. Now, when you're looking to meet the needs of an ever-changing marketplace, one thing is key: talent versatility. Meeting customer needs while reinforcing your company's culture, values, and standards can be a serious challenge, particularly when you're trying to keep labor costs under control. One way to increase talent versatility is to support full-time team members with scalable talent. That is, freelance workers, whose specific abilities complement those of your permanent workers and may even fill skill gaps within your team. Today, I'm so pleased to talk with Greg Kilstrom. As the co-founder and CEO of CareerGig, Greg has found a better way for freelancers to grow their careers and for companies to find outstanding freelance talent quickly. Greg has been featured in Forbes, on NBC News, in Smart Brief, and Tech Republic, just to name a few, and he is here with us today to share how the future workforce is freelance, remote, and always learning. Greg, thanks so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So I think when most people think of the gig economy, they think Uber, they think Instacart, but freelance work has really been a component of workplaces for as long as there have been workplaces, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's certainly been an increase in members of what we call like the freelance economy or gig economy over the last several years. But really, when you look at it, since the late 1970s, for instance, there was about 9-10% of the workforce were independents or freelancers. We're now up to, as of last year, up to about 35% of the U.S. workforce is engaging in some kind of freelance work. That's expected to be as high as 60% worldwide by 2030. So we're on an upward trajectory. And I mean, in addition to that, what we see is every time there is a major disruption, so a financial crisis, let's say. So, we had 2001, we had 2008, 9, and we're currently going through a disruption as well. We see an increase in people going independent, I would say just being a little more disenchanted with the idea of a full-time job being a source of stability. And so, in 2008, 2009, that's where, as you mentioned, the Ubers and Instacarts, that was really the birth of the gig economy as we know it. What we're seeing right now is a transition for a lot more of the knowledge workers and some of the more highly skilled roles moving a lot more into the freelance economy.
Right. So the concept of the gig economy is really just a rebranding of the freelance term. Or do you think of it more as utilizing freelancers in areas like you were just saying about where they've not been used before?
Yeah, I look at it. There's certain industries where I think software development and even the marketing industry, those are industries where freelance work has been. There's been freelancers in those industries for decades, and so they're also having an easier transition into using them even more so. Right now, we're seeing industries where everything from healthcare, whether that's nurses that have been a little more, already in the contract space, but doctors being contractors and, lawyers, all sorts of areas where they weren't as prevalent are moving more and more into this kind of fractional employment. And because that's what the buyers need. They don't need, they have fractional needs.
Right.
They don't have as many full-time needs. And so, yeah, to your point about gig economy versus freelance economy, I see a nuance. I mean, I live and breathe this stuff every day, but I see a nuance in gig economy is I guess either a broader term or, I use it more specifically to talk about the drivers, the delivery, the Ubers, the Instacarts, all of those. And freelance economy to me means more a little more highly paid, skilled work and stuff like that.
Interesting. So, is there a certain fear factor in someone becoming a freelancer? I mean, like, we've got to shift that mindset away from you need a stable job, you need a steady paycheck to, my skills are worth more on the open market. Have you seen, a fear factor there with freelancers not wanting to jump in because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know my first time freelancing was so back in my second gig out of college, full-time job, was working for a startup back in the early internet days. So,
Hmm.
in 2002, me and 40 or 50 of my closest coworkers got, put in a room and laid off on the same day because they ran out of money
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. So, I was terrified because even coming from a design and, a background where freelancing is relatively common, I was terrified to lose my benefits, my
Sure.
salary. I was,
Yeah.
early 20s, I less risky as things like that go, but still, still terrified. But quickly found my path there. But yeah, I think the fallacy though is that a full-time job is stable in the
Right.
first place, because we
Right.
keep finding this out every decade or so, that they're as stable as the economy and as
Hmm.
stable as demand for jobs is, and that we keep getting disrupted, and every single time we find out, it's that's that gold watch and the pension and all that stuff that never existed in my career,
Right.
doesn't exist for anybody really anymore. And so I think it's a faulty premise that a full-time job is, much more stable.
And I had somebody explain it to me at one point that, if you work for one company, you have one source of income, and that, that's riskier than having multiple sources of income. It's much easier to have different companies that you work for, and you've got a much broader base for your income at that point. Do you think that companies also have a certain fear factor about hiring freelancers?
Yeah, there's definitely the risk involved is, when you have a full-time employee, they gain the background knowledge. I mean, that's what they're focused on. They
Mhm.
know the internal processes. You know back when people worked on site, they interacted directly with coworkers, and so there was knowledge transfer was easier, background knowledge. I mean, tenure has also gone down fairly rapidly over the years, but still, even if it's an 18-month tenure, it's at least 18 months of continuous learning and knowledge transfer and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's definitely a risk in hiring freelancers. And the other part is, when business is good, there's demand for freelancers, and so you need, just like you think about for full-time employees loyalty, you need to build loyalty models for your contractors to make sure, because there's even more, there could be even more risk of demand for good freelancers.
Mhm, mhm. And I think we can all agree, you referenced it a little bit a minute ago, that at least philosophically, remote work is here to stay. Do you think that that trend is also true for the use of freelancers? Are companies looking for additional flexibility when what happens next is anybody's guess? Is that gonna continue?
I do, and I think it's only going to increase. And I think, just like what we've seen with remote work, remote work was inevitable. It's just we had this, no one asked for this great social experiment, and certainly
Right?
there's, terrible consequences
Yes.
on many fronts. But if we can, I try to look at the positive when possible, because when there's so much negative, you kind of just have to do that.
Mhm.
Just kind of look on the bright side. And the bright side is, this was going to happen, and it was actually necessary to happen, that we get more remote. But I mean, think about all the positives of that. Is okay, now you have a much more diverse hiring pool. People that did not have access to the types of work that they wanted, because they just simply couldn't afford rents in downtown New York or San Francisco
Mhm.
or wherever,
Yeah.
now can all of a sudden qualify for this work. Like, there's some major positives when we get into diversity in the workplace, and of all kinds. The reason why freelance is also going to, continue to be necessary, though, is as automation continues to, change how we look at skills needs and everything like that, these fractional needs are only going to increase. I mean, you need people that are highly skilled in very specific types of work, but you don't need them full time, and therefore
Mhm.
you need great freelancers that, to be frank, you need great freelancers that know how to work with robots to like get the work done.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So let's talk just for a second about, you mentioned diversity briefly. I would love to talk a little bit about how freelancers, how the gig economy can actually support diversity and inclusion within our workplaces.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, of course, I think in addition to remote work, just, broadly speaking, promoting that, I mean, think When we think about why people get, you referred to this earlier, when we think about why people get full-time jobs, I mean, there's, we all have varying levels of whether it's risk tolerance or personal needs. And,
Mhm.
we've got families, we've got whatever exactly the needs are that need to be taken care of. They're of primary importance to each of us. There's a lot of people that simply can't have a full-time job.
Mhm.
They've got kids, they've got a spouse or partner they need to take care of, parents, whatever the case may be, or a disability, something like that just prevents them from having a full-time job. But they're highly skilled. They're fully capable at what they're able to do. They just can't sit in an office all day,
Mhm.
for one reason or the other, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this kind of fractional work allows them to do that. There's also cases where there are Uber drivers out there that want to be data scientists or cybersecurity experts, but they can't take the time to stop, bringing in some income to do that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if they can ease their way into that career that they eventually want, isn't that amazing that we live in a world where that's possible? And
Yeah.
so we're part of what I'm trying to build with CareerGig is actually a tool that optimizes someone's potential in order to do that. And wherever your starting point is, we all come from backgrounds. It's everybody's different, but we can achieve a goal if we just have the right tools to be able to ease our way into that, as opposed to just hoping that something is going to fall in our lap and magically change. That's not going to happen.
I love that. I love the idea that we can all find fulfilling work and work towards the things that make us really just blossom in the workplace. So we're going to take a quick sponsorship break right now, but when we return, Greg, we're going to talk about the benefits of freelancing, both for the freelancers and for the companies that hire them. So stay with us. In human resources, employee, and labor relations, it's actually tough to keep your eye on the ball. With changes to the landscape nearly every day, from legislation to best practices, even great ideas that you know your company might benefit from. Well, honestly, it can be overwhelming. That's why the Union Proof team at Projections developed a Monday morning news digest just for you. Join the Conversation is a completely free resource that gives you just the information you need to kick off your week with the top developments and insights. Our team does all the hard work for you, wading through anything that isn't of value to deliver exactly what you need to know now. Sign up today at unionproof.com/join the conversation. Your future self will thank you. We're back with Greg Kilstrom, co-founder and CEO of CareerGig. Greg, I want to talk more about your company, CareerGig, in just a minute. But one of the things I think makes what you do so valuable is that you represent both sides of that on-demand equation, the freelance workers as well as those who hire them. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of this model, and let's start with the benefit to the employer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we solve two big challenges in the workforce, and so one for freelancers and one for companies. So I'll certainly start with the companies and the employers. So the challenge that we see is, there's a few facets to this. I mean, one is, how do you find the absolute best talent, but also have the confidence that someone is who they say they are? So quick examples: resumes. 75% of resumes have at least one factual inaccuracy.
Mm-hmm.
You go to these sites, these freelance sites with 5-star rating systems, and you know what? How in the world do you know if someone's actually legitimately good? I mean, all they need is 100 close friends to give them a 5-star rating, and all of a sudden they look competitive. If they get a bad rating, they shut their profile down and start a new one. Or
Mm-hmm.
the LinkedIn example, is I've been recommended for skills that I don't have by people that I don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, what is the value of those things if we can't have a real true history and understanding that when someone says they did something or can do something, we have a way to figure that out, and without hiring them first and losing time, money, and productivity. So that's what we're building for companies is, how do we take a resume, which also is, resumes are outdated in their needs. I mean, the way I was taught to read resumes, one aspect is, well, if somebody jumps around a lot and only works at places for a year or two,
Right.
they're probably not worth hiring. Well, that's the average tenure of a CMO is 18 months.
Yep.
And for more junior people, not much longer than that. So reading resumes doesn't tell you much. It
Hmm.
just, so like, that's what we're building is, okay, let's find a better way to trust, who we're hiring, and,
Hmm.
just kind of ease that friction.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because you talk about, don't look at somebody who's jumped jobs a lot, but really that's where people are growing. They're learning and growing if they're changing jobs all the time, and that skill set that's coming to you is actually probably more valuable. Same question. Let's focus on the other side. How does freelancing benefit that actual freelance employee?
Yeah, so I guess two parts to that. I mean, one is the financial stability and security that when we were talking earlier about why people get full-time jobs, it is, I've got a salary, I know I get paid on the 1st
Mhm.
and the 15th, and I
Mhm.
know I've got health benefits and life insurance, disability, all of that stuff. So where we part of that is we need to make the best marketplace, ease the friction of getting new work. And there's a lot of freelance marketplaces out there, or at least
Mhm.
several that I would say do a good job on that. I'll get to some of the faults with some of them, but
Yes.
they do a fine job on that. But they're not taking care of the financial stability and security, in the sense of CareerGig offers guaranteed issue health, life, disability. We offer other types of insurance. I mean, anything
Wow.
to, pet insurance, and, and legal services, and all those kinds of things. But, a lot of things that you simply can't. Not only can you can get health insurance from your spouse or partner, you can get health insurance through the
Mhm.
exchanges, and, depending on where you live and the quality of exchange, it's either a good deal, or, at least you're thankful that it exists because you can get it. But we offer, guaranteed issue on life insurance and disability, which you just simply can't get from your spouse or partner.
Mhm.
If you try to get it independently, it's going to be expensive. It's hard to get.
Sure.
So that those kinds of things, we make it easy. In addition to that, we pay a percent. So we make money off transaction fees. So when you get hired, we don't charge subscriptions, nothing like that. When you get hired, we take a cut of those fees, similar to some of the other platforms out there.
Mhm.
We contribute a portion of those fees actually into your insurance if you buy it through us. So
Wow.
it's the closest thing to a employer contribution plan.
Yeah.
So if you make if you make money through our platform, you're saving hundreds, if not potentially thousands of dollars on your insurance, which
Mhm.
you might get free insurance, in other words, through our platform if you work the right amount of hours. So that's a huge thing. The other part is, to go back to the employer benefit. In these platforms where there's 5-star rating systems, so there's a bunch of people that have those things. There's also
Mhm.
there's an incentive to drive your hourly rate down, because how else are you going to stand out in a world where all you need
Sure.
is a good rating?
Right.
When we have the most accurate record of work, and your actual skills and achievements speak for themselves, we can worry less about, do you charge $20 an hour or do you charge $100 an hour? I mean, obviously, always price is a consideration to companies, but actual skills and actual abilities, how quickly you can do work because you're
Mhm.
so highly skilled, matters a lot. And any smart, company understands that already, but it's impossible to tell that from looking at a rating or some reviews on a site somewhere. But actually seeing what someone's accomplished and having confidence that they can do that gives you a much better sense of that. So it levels the playing field for highly skilled people, and I think that's important too.
Sure, and I've experienced that myself, where you're looking at a couple of different people and they've got, equally good ratings, but, they're all you're looking at is that hourly rate. If they've got the same skills, it just
Yeah.
becomes a numbers game, and that's really not the way to hire someone. That's not how you get the skills that you need. So let's continue on that a little bit. What are the challenges of freelancing or hiring freelancers? How do people differentiate and make sure that they're hiring the right person?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to hiring for full time, but there's definitely key differences. I mean, so you don't have 6 months to onboard a freelancer or
Right,
a contractor, right? They
right,
need to be
right,
productive, like, if not minute one, hour
right.
one, right?
Yes, for
So
sure.
so that's and that takes two parties. It takes a freelancer that understands that they're versatile. They need to be able to handle change there's some contractors that focus more on longer term gigs, and that's, when I talk with freelancers, that's a personality thing, or
Mhm.
that's a risk preference, if you will, of some people just don't like a lot of things going on. Some people thrive on it. I mean, I'm one of those people that thrives on a million things going on. I mean, I
Mhm.
had a marketing agency with 30 different clients, and I love that. But that some people just don't. They do better when they can focus, go deep on one thing,
Mhm.
or things like that. But but hiring someone, yeah, you need to be able to tell very quickly if they're going to be able to do what they say they can do.
Mhm.
One way we help companies do that, and is, so when I had my agency back in the day, when we hired software engineers, we wrote our own tests. Like, we didn't rely on third party
Mhm.
testing platforms or anything like
Mhm.
that. We wrote our own tests because we know if they can answer these set of 3 questions, then they're going to do just fine. We allow companies to actually customize. We have skills assessments that are great, and they work well for for a wide audience, but they don't work for everybody. And so we allow companies to customize their own. So just like I did back in the day, someone can use their own test. If someone passes that test, you can see a list. You can pre-qualify people that, okay, they not only do they have the skills that we need, but they know the way that we write code. We use spaces,
Mhm.
not tabs, or whatever. They know our preferences. Or we work in the healthcare space, and so is a nurse accredited in the state that I operate in? Because what, no matter what they've done, if they can't legally
Right.
do the work, then it's not
Right.
worth talking with. They could be the
Yeah.
greatest person in the world, but
Right.
they can't do the work. So let's skip that point of friction. So that's like finding the best and most efficient ways to pre-qualify people for things.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the day, it's always there's that relationship component. They obviously have to be a great person and cultural fit, and
Right.
and all those things, but we're not going to escape that, and nor should we. But let's get all of the other stuff that is quantifiable out of the way and make it as easy as possible, because that's the stuff that is so, it's so easy, and yet it's so easy to overlook, or it's so easy to let it get in the way early on. Once you actually you meet someone, you like them, but they then you find out these quantifiable things aren't true, and so you sometimes end up compromising. And so
Mhm.
let's make that easier and more efficient.
Yeah, brilliant. You're spot on there. So let's talk a little bit more. You're talking about qualifying people and the technology. How has technology helped ease the way for freelance growth? I mean, I'm thinking about like team apps like Slack and Hive and Zoom and the other ways that we're staying connected to our teams these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those that you mentioned and more. It's some of this just comes down to back to the remote work thing of setting a company up to work remotely, even with full time employees, makes it a lot easier to work
Mhm.
remotely with freelance and contractors. And so some of those ways that the things that you have to keep in mind with contractors is they're not in all of your company meetings. They don't know company politics
Yep.
and culture like full-time people do. And so,
Mhm.
they're not, whether it's a virtual happy hour or a real one or whatever, it's like they're not always in those things. And that
Right.
some of that is just, there's 1099 compliance things where sometimes there's things that it's not appropriate for them to be
Right.
part of, and some of it they just wouldn't. And it's just that's just how it is. So, like, keeping that in mind of like, okay, we need the shorthand version of a lot of things for these contractors, so that they need to feel part of the team, or else they're not going to be as invested in the work. And in
Mhm.
a highly competitive workspace for freelancers, you do need to worry about that. I mean, when unemployment was at record lows, everybody was talking about employee experience in a slightly different way than they are now. Employee
Right.
experience is always important, no matter the unemployment rates, but there were people were talking about it in a very different way than they are, potentially now, um, when unemployment is a little bit different. But good people are always in demand, and you always need to, you always want to keep them loyal. So finding ways to, like, that shorthand version of, okay, this is what it's like to work here. This is the 30-minute version of the total immersion, like, onboarding process, and everything you need to know. And then thinking about what's the employee experience for contractors. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that's something that it as the workforce increases, the freelance workforce increases, that's something where it's a parallel, but it's a separate employee experience track that you need to account for.
Yeah, and at Projections, we produce videos that are orientation based and could be used for contractors. So you could give them easily. Here's the 5-minute version of our culture and our people, and what we believe, and a great way to get them started. What can companies do to further integrate their freelance workers? Any ideas on how to make them feel like full time staff, even though they're contractors?
Yeah, I think it's remembering that, remembering that they are part of the team. And again, there's things that they can't nor should be part of just because they're 1099s. They're not,
Right.
they're not W2s. But I think remembering that, hey, you know what, it would be really good for this person to, to be part of this or be looped into this. Some of it is just mindfulness of because they're not on the company intranet, just to make it up, like they're not on these channels that maybe all the full-time employees are.
Hmm.
Give them a little more insight, and whoever's managing them, because whoever's managing them is a full-time employee, needs the empathy and understanding that, yeah, they're going to need a little explanation on the why of this, because they didn't attend the all hands meeting with full-time
Right.
employees only. So
Hmm.
some of, and that's, I wish I like to quantify things wherever possible, but it some of this takes empathy and just the human relationship stuff too.
For sure. For sure. All right, Greg, we're going to take some time out for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and our guest today is Greg Kilstrom, the co-founder and CEO of CareerGig. We are back. Greg, your company CareerGig has reimagined the freelance business yet again with its on-demand workforce. How is CareerGig different than other companies that support gig workers?
Yeah, no, great question. So the way that we approach the freelance workplace, there are some similarities in the sense of, broadly speaking, we're a freelance marketplace, but the way that we approach it is very different. And so um, the way that we look at reputation and matching. So I talked earlier about how important it is to us to build the most accurate record of work history. That is something critical to being able to determine not only who is going to be the best fit, but also for us to be able to recommend the best people, recommend the best gigs to freelancers. And so that is, we are very focused on finding the most accurate information, verifying that information. So it's not just enough to say, so we have 3 levels of verification. So level 1 is me claiming something. So me saying, okay, I can do this. I'm good at Adobe Photoshop as a designer.
Hmm.
Step 2 is having someone confirm that. So that could be my former boss, that could be a client, or someone saying, yes, Greg can use Adobe Photoshop. Now, the fault with that is alone, if those were the only 2 steps, is first of all, how can you truly trust what everyone says? Again, knowing that resumes have inaccuracies and social media profiles are really what we want people to see about us. Same thing with references. I mean, when you apply for a job, do you give the people that are going to give you a bad reference or a good reference? It's pretty obvious. The third step in our what we call our staircase of proof is getting that authority, that third party objective validation of, is this true? And so that's where there's a number of different ways to do it depending on what we're verifying. But this could be everything from having someone take a skills assessment to say, okay, yes, take the Adobe Photoshop skills assessment, and if you pass at the expert level, that's going to show, and you can say, hey, I passed.
Hmm.
If there's certification, there's a third party source that is independently verified, and all that stuff that can do that. I mentioned the accreditation thing with nurses. So there's
Hmm.
third party authorities that can do that. There's background checks where we can verify that someone actually worked where they said they did, or things like that. So that's one step where there's a lot of places that they use a very traditional staffing model of verifying. They'll do an interview, they'll check a couple references, but they
Hmm.
don't take the depth that we do in it. Or they're on the other end where it's simply a rating system where, again, it's as accurate as the people rating, and you kind of have to trust it.
Hmm.
So that's a big thing. And so then feeding into that on the on-demand workforce, once you have these qualifications that you can trust, you can pre-qualify these people. We call it badging, basically, where as company X can say, these are the 8 requirements for anyone that works for me as a software engineer, for instance.
Hmm.
And if, as long as they pass all of those, they're pre-qualified. And so I can pull from this on-demand, verified talent pool when I
Hmm.
need them. And they're freelancers by choice. So they're not going to go off the market. They're not looking for a full-time job. They're
Hmm.
freelancers by choice. And so that's how we refer to as the verified on-demand workforce.
It just makes so much sense. That's brilliant. I love it. So tell me, you have a couple of podcasts also, which is how you and I met. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my first podcast. So I wrote a series of books on applying agile principles to various aspects of business. So one was branding and marketing, which is where my background comes from, and I looked a little deeper into the consumer landscape, and have another one coming out soon about the workforce in particular. But as I was doing that, I just writing a book is I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy doing the research, but it's a very static thing. It's a
Hmm.
static point in time of finishing it, and
Yep.
so I wanted to take that in a different place and just have conversations, much like we're having now, of looking at. So it's called The Agile World is the first podcast that I started. We're about to start season 3 in a few months here, and just look at applying agile in a very broad sense. So I've had scrum masters on my show and all
Mm.
that, but really more often it's people just looking at adaptivity and agility in different aspects of business, whether that's
Mhm.
a doctor that had to convert to telehealth because of the pandemic, and how that's worked, or
Mhm.
people in marketing, HR, all those kinds of things. And then the second podcast I have is called The Agile Workforce, which is very specifically in the HR and workforce space, and just kind of started that very recently with CareerGig.
Fascinating. Yeah, we've all seen how we've had to pivot over the last year or so, and how it's possible. And listening to other people's stories of how they've done that are really fascinating. So, how can our listeners find out more about Career Gig and what you do and how you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So CareerGig, you can just go to careergig.com and check it out. It's free to sign up. There's no subscription, so you can sign up as a freelancer or a company. If you're a company, I heavily recommend setting up a demo. We'd be happy to walk you through it and just show you how easy it is, and everything like that. And to get in touch with me personally, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so always happy to reach out. Please mention that you heard me on this podcast,
Uh-huh.
but happy to reach out and connect.
Yeah. And I want to let our listeners know that a link to the Career Gig website will, of course, be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to grab that at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Greg, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions we ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. First question is a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about on demand talent. In your opinion, which on demand media service is better, Netflix or Spotify?
Netflix.
All right. I think we all have seen that in the last year or so. What's the
Yeah,
best
yeah.
what's the best book you've read recently?
The Hard Thing About Hard Things by
Oh
Ben
yeah.
Horowitz.
Yep, that's a great one. What is your favorite thing about Career Gig?
I love finding better ways to help people have better careers and more opportunity.
So fulfilling. Tell me, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Someone said to me, and I've repeated it often, just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's gotten me out of a lot of trouble.
Yeah, for sure. Kept you out of it, I'm sure. So tell me who or what inspires you.
I'm inspired by the people that I work with. Honestly, I'm so lucky and fortunate to have a lot of really talented people around me, and some of them who I've known for decades, and some of them who I've met recently. But I'm inspired by seeing other people just we work remotely, but they come to work energized
Yep.
and inspired, and having a common mission like that. I love it.
Yep, I feel that. Our team is the same way. Thanks so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Greg.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
And thanks too to our listeners. Once again, this is your reminder to grab your companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR, or you know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And last but certainly not least, to make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR, we hope you'll subscribe to the podcast. Drop us a line, leave us a review, or simply rate us 5 stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.